part of the Boundless Audio Podcast Network.
Hello, welcome to another episode of the Artist Pivot Podcast. I am your host, Ayana Major Bay, and I happen to be an actor, voiceover artist, mentor, and world traveler. This is a bi-weekly show featuring conversations about pivots and life lessons from the perspective of artists, those who work in and around the arts, and arts educators. Everyone possesses the ability to pivot. You just have to be reminded sometimes, and that is what I am here to do. To stay up to date and in the know about merchandise, exclusive content, and how to support the show, please subscribe to the newsletter at ayanabay.com/podcast. That's AYANABEY.com/podcast. And there is a link in the show notes. We'll get to this week's episode after a word from our sponsors. I have found that therapy is a tool to use to improve your life in one of the healthiest ways. For those who are working on their mental health and well-being, on a journey of facing your fears, or trying therapy for the first time, our show sponsor BetterHelp is here to help you. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. Join the 2 million plus people who have taken charge of their mental health with an experienced BetterHelp therapist. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/artistpivot. That's betterhelp.com/artistpivot. All right, y'all. So I am so excited to say that joining me today is Miss Shenea Stiletto, and she is a former 2-time World Champion Acrobatic Gymnast, USA Gymnastics Hall of Fame member, survivor of USA Gymnastics, and a World Class Circus Handbalancer inducted into the World Acrobatic Hall of Fame, who has been for nearly 2 decades performing with elite entertainment companies worldwide, including Cirque Du Soleil. Shenea's career highlights have included becoming the first ever African-American woman to perform a lead character and acrobatic role in a Cirque Du Soleil production, in which she performed Varekai as the promised character. Shenea Stiletto is also a circus trainer, educator, circus advocate for the American Circus Alliance, and dual circus podcast host for the pro series Think Like An Acrobat, produced by CircusTalk.com, and her own podcast, Live Like An Acrobat, where she explores circuspreneurship and the competitive high-performance athletic arenas. Y'all, welcome, Shenea. Hello there.
Hello, thank you so much for having me, Ayana. I'm so grateful and honored to be here with you today.
You are so very welcome. Thank you very much. And I am grateful and honored for you to be here today. So I have a question for you, my first one. If I texted you, Shenea, how are you doing? How's your day going? But you could only respond in emojis only, what would you text me?
Oh, that's almost too easy for someone like me. Okay, I would text you the red stiletto emoji,
Yes.
the dancer in the red dress flamingo style emoji,
Okay.
the little flame emoji,
Yes.
and the heart emoji,
Mhm.
and the meditating emoji. That is my day. That is my
That's your
mood.
day.
Yes.
I love that. That's a whole mood. That's an entire mood.
That carries me from morning to afternoon to night.
Yes. I'm here for that. That's an entire mood. Thank you for that imaginary text. I love it. Thank you so much. That was a good one. That was a good one. You're welcome.
That's a good question.
You're welcome. And you're also wearing red.
Yeah.
You're on red lipstick. That's your thing.
I have recognized that unless I have a red lipstick on camera somewhat, or even when I'm talking, even if I'm not on camera, something it's just not me.
Understood. I understand that.
I don't show up properly. I feel like my lips disappear. Something about me kind of disappears. So I've tried the nude look. Just doesn't work out. So red lip it is at all times. It's fire.
Yes. Yes, ma'am. And yes, know that about yourself. It's a red lip all the time, period.
Know thyself.
Know thyself. For me, it's mascara. Like, I don't necessarily have a lip color, but if I don't have mascara on, I'm like, who is that? Like, I don't even have to have on any other makeup. None. But I will always leave the house with mascara. And if I don't, it's like, what? I'm sorry, I'm not myself. I'm not. I need to go. I need to start again. Start the day again.
You are gorgeous, by the way. You are gorgeous. Your skin is gorgeous. Everything about you is gorgeous.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. I received that. Thank you.
Great teeth, wonderful smile.
Thanks. Same with you, sis. I'm over here. Yes, come on. You are gorgeous. Okay.
Never had braces.
Neither have I.
They don't know how to handle it. I'm telling you. People are like, never had braces. I'm like, no, not even Invisalign. Not even later in life. No.
Me neither. And I also refuse to close my gap. I don't know if y'all can see it.
I don't see any gap.
It's okay, great. Thanks. I mean, I see it because I grew up with it, but every year without fail, I'm in my 30s, y'all, and my dentist literally goes, "You don't want to close that gap?" No, I don't. No. I don't want to close the gap.
No. I mean, I think you have a perfectly gorgeous smile. And and with the gap, without the gap, I mean.
Right. With or without. Thank you very much. Yes. I mean, it's a mini gap. Like, it's not.
I don't see it. I guess it's there.
But my dentist does. My dentist sees it every time. And I'm like, what? No, I don't want to close the gap. I don't.
I know. They offer me Invisalign almost every single time I go. So there you go.
Right.
And I have no gap. So there you go.
No. You're right. So, right.
I don't know what it is, but
I don't know what it is either. It's fine. No, listen, we're not going to try to find out because it's fine. We'll keep doing what we've been doing.
Exactly.
I love it. So, y'all, before we get too far down this teeth rabbit hole, Shenea, I want to ask you about your career, about your many pivots as a circuspreneur. I love that.
Thank you.
And I guess start at the beginning. I guess that's a good place to start. Like, was the circus in your life growing up, or was it something you discovered? And then how were you like, oh, you know what? Y'all, I'm going to be an acrobat. I'm gonna do it. So tell me how that happened.
Yeah, how did that happen? Because it's so random and weird. And even like to this day, I just think of like all the different like events in my life that had to happen that were very imperfect and like just for better or worse, just like would not have like led me like down this path. Like I didn't come from a traditional background. I didn't come from like a family circus type of thing. I started out as a little baby acrobatic gymnast. And I did that because my grandmother and my aunt put me in dance and like in ballet and tap and jazz when I was a little girl. And I saw acrobatic gymnastics in my dance studio. And one of my coaches discovered me. He thought I was way younger than I was because I was very, very tiny for my age. I still am. I'm still waiting for that growth spurt. It has not happened. But he thought that I was like 5. I mean, that's around like the typical age. Like 4, 3, 5 years old is when you start gymnastics. But I was 8. And he was like, well, she's a little old, but I think she would be great. I think she has maybe a lot of natural ability. So I started from there. And I'm from San Jose, California. My coach had immigrated from Bulgaria. So he immigrated. He grew up in the Soviet Union. And so it was just all very random and bizarre. And at that time, of course, I wasn't thinking in terms of like the circus, but I did get into a very niche version of regular gymnastics. Most times when people think of gymnastics, they think about artistic gymnastics, which is the balance beam, which is Simone Biles, which is Dominique Dawes, which is that whole kind of vibe and field. I went
Mhm.
into a very obscure version in
Okay.
America of gymnastics, which to people kind of looks like cheerleading in a way. I even hate to kind of put them in the same vein because we work very, very hard of making ourselves like our own sport. But
Mhm.
acrobatic gymnastics is like the partnering that you would see in a Cirque du Soleil production. So many of the acrobats that you see in Cirque du Soleil actually came from my sport. But I didn't know that. I didn't know that
Okay.
growing up. It's a non-Olympic sport, so that's also why it's like within USA Gymnastics, but like even just like up until I think the past like few years, like now we're on ESPN, like we're on Sports Center. You see our competitions, acrobatic
Mhm.
gymnastics is kind of everywhere. And I will say it a million times in this podcast just because I am always trying to hype my sport because it's so
Yeah.
gorgeous and so beautiful. It's dynamic. You have partners throwing you up in the air. You balance on people. You don't use any apparatuses. You don't use
Mhm.
the beam. You don't use the uneven bars.
Mhm.
You use the person, and they just kind of catapult you into the air. So I got really lucky. I had a big journey within competition. I
Mhm.
competed on the world level. I was national champion multiple times. I went to World Games. I went to World Championships several times. I was very, very fortunate to become the first ever American world champion,
Mhm.
which again, at that time was, just very strange, coming from San Jose, California. There was
Yeah.
a very big kind of acrobatic gymnastics world and environment within California. So I did get lucky on that end. Um,
Okay.
those several years ago, it was kind of it was very dispersed like throughout America, but it was very
Mhm.
heavy on the West Coast. So
Okay.
there was a really, really big circuit there. So I had a pretty long career. I competed for about a decade. And by way of doing that, I discovered that that is the transition that one does make from competitive space to the circus space. And I had great coaches.
Mhm.
I started, Cirque du Soleil started scouting me when I was a minor because years ago,
Mhm.
you could work for Cirque du Soleil as a minor, as a kid. And you could
Okay.
go get a contract and go without your parents and like just be working at like
Huh.
as soon as you had a work permit, and even before then, like depending on what country you were, you could be there at like 12
Yeah. Wow.
have a full career.
Right.
Like they would take you.
Mhm.
So it was very special, but my coaches, I transitioned and I ended up having Russian coaches at that time, and they
Mhm.
really wanted me to compete. They didn't want me to go straight away into the performance world, into the circus world. They wanted me to achieve
Ah.
as much as I could as a competitor. They were like,
Okay.
you know what? If you don't go as far, you're always going to feel like you missed out on something.
Mhm.
And so that was the first time in my life where I was almost out of pivot, right? Because I could have pivoted way earlier in my life.
Okay.
And I was already being told that like my days were numbered, which is interesting. When you kind of age out of something so young in your life, it creates something very different in you. First off,
Mhm.
you get very used to defending what you do,
Uh-huh.
and you've really got to love it because people are trying to talk you out of doing what you love to do all the time. I always had
Yeah.
that. You can't go to college with acrobatic gymnastics. You could go in a different way. So why don't you change and switch to a different sport? Why don't you change and switch to a different kind of passion so that you can use your gymnastics to go to college? And
Mhm.
I didn't want that. I was like, this is my
Mhm.
home, this is what I love. And then I also understood too, I could have a career
Mhm.
beyond this, and I could even have a career beyond competing because my friends, many of them like did not go into the circus
Okay.
space after going to the Olympics.
Yeah.
After we did, like the Olympic tour, for example, I was very fortunate. I was made an honorary Olympian, and I was put
Mhm.
on the Olympic tours. That was the first that USA Gymnastics had ever done that. So I had like this journey that could have been where I did do like NCAA,
Mhm.
my friends did. But because that wasn't a route for me, the circus was actually the most pronounced route to be able to maintain my skill in
Right.
all of that crazy back bending work that
Mhm.
I had
Mhm.
invested like my entire life and my family's entire life into as well. To see that kind of cut off, at the age of like 18, 19, 20, 21,
Mm-hmm.
would really have been a climb. And I'm grateful that I had coaches that had sent their athletes for a very long time into Cirque du Soleil or into the circus world.
Okay.
So they really assisted me in that pivot, in the pivot from high level competitor, which is so incredibly difficult and
Mm-hmm.
was so challenging, especially as an American, because they like underestimated us, they devalued us, they
Mm-hmm.
didn't expect a lot from us. And then when we did get competitive, they didn't want to give us our due. At that time. It's very political,
Mm-hmm.
just like it is now. And, going from being in that space to then now being like a circuspreneur or like a business owner in an entity and
Mm-hmm.
into a world that is very uncharted because the circus is like to
Right.
this day. I mean, it's better than it used to be, but you go from this environment that's highly regimented. And even
Mm-hmm.
my coach didn't want me, for example, to go straight into Cirque du Soleil.
Uh-huh.
He wanted me to diversify and to work for a lot of different companies. He didn't want me to feel like I was just a number or
Mm-hmm.
just a part of a production because I had
Mm-hmm.
been so visible and so seen in my acrobatic competitive career.
Mm-hmm.
He did not want me to feel invisible all of a sudden. He
Mm-hmm.
said, that will maybe like like hurt you on a certain level that we may
Uh-huh.
never be able to rectify. And that was from his own experience of carrying other acrobats through that journey and learning
Okay.
from that. So, for some people, the pinnacle was you go straight from there. And like I said, I did have friends that, also too could not go and do NCAA because they were from different levels, different gymnastics disciplines like
Mm-hmm.
trampoline or like tumbling or like rhythmic gymnastics as well. So
Yeah.
they did go straight into Cirque du Soleil. And
Okay. Okay.
our journeys were very different. They
Mm-hmm.
were very, very different.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, I understand that. So then my question for you, when you did make that pivot to go, okay, actually, I think I'm gonna perform now. Instead of being a competitor, I'm gonna use my skills and be now of a performer. Was that, I don't wanna say difficult, because you already had your mindset, you already were like, "No, this is my path." But did it take some getting used to not be in that competitive mindset and to also like, yes, you're pivoting your avenue, but also like my mindset, "Oh, I'm not in competition with anybody right now. Like I'm doing this because I love it and I wanna do it."
Totally. I mean, it was very difficult for several reasons. The first
Mhm.
reason was because I didn't want to necessarily stop competing. And
Okay.
because our sport was not funded on the same level as Olympic sports,
Mhm.
it really came down to some difficult decisions. It's very expensive to stay in a sport like this.
Okay.
And because I was also competing with a partner that was much older than me, which is
Mhm.
very normal and typical within acrobatic gymnastics, there were
Mhm.
some decisions that needed to be made. But I could have probably competed for at least another 4 or 5 years and
Okay.
probably won some more world championships. So it was a challenge to
Mhm.
leave at that moment. I did leave at 18. Which is again still fairly young, and I
Mhm.
was in kind of like the best shape of my life at that time. And I was lucky enough to be in that because not everyone gets to that cycle
Mhm.
and is in the best shape of their life. Some people are very broken by that point and have had several surgeries, have had a
Mhm.
lot of chronic injuries. And that's another reason why sometimes they retire and go into the performance space because it's
Mhm.
not as difficult. Another thing as well, it was interesting. I mean, I love to compete as well.
Yeah.
I loved it. For some
Yeah.
people, it's like overwhelming for them. They don't like it. It's
Understood.
they're not natural competitors. And
Mhm.
another thing as well, I loved competing against myself. I never ever
Mm.
really felt like I was competing against others. And I know sometimes people say that, but I really, really felt that. I think it maybe came down to my coaches, but I think it
Mhm.
also too just came down to like who I was at the time and how I saw myself and what I felt like. I wasn't always like thinking about others. I think maybe it's because I'm from like a group sport and it wasn't like singular. And so I was always in partnership with people. So you were always used to
Yeah.
someone else helping you to get ahead and to do better. And that definitely gave me, I think, a very different foundation going from the competitive space into like the performance arena. But I definitely had a crisis. I mean, there was a crisis of like identity within that of like, how do we do this?
Ah.
Because you have to figure out who you are. You have to
Uh-huh.
identify yourself as an artist. What kind of shows you want to do? What kind of performances do you want to do? How do you create them? Who's going to negotiate for you? Because before you have your coach negotiating everything for you, and you have people doing everything for you and telling you what to do and how to do it all the time and how it's going to be done. And there's a system. If I do this, it's going to be like this. And if I, like from point A to point B, like, there is definitely a path there, even if it is sometimes dicey, because it's so challenging.
Right.
But with circus, it just was like an open book of like, wow, I get to really explore all of these different facets of myself. I really had to start connecting to myself emotionally. I would say that that was a part that was great that my coaches got me to, very strong, again, growing up with Eastern Europeans my entire life, there's a part of yourself that you're able to compartmentalize. That's how you're able to be such a high level competitor. But they always said too that they didn't want to fully take away my Americanness, which was very, very sweet.
Yeah.
They were like, you have this kind of other passion within you that we don't have because we didn't grow up with that. They were like, your whole world is open. At this point, your whole world is open. You can do anything you want with this skill and with this talent. And first you were choosing to do this, this isn't something you were forced into. They were like, and now you're choosing to go into the circus. It's again, not something you have to do. You can do other things. I mean, like my parents thought I was going to go to Stanford and be a neurosurgeon, and they still think that to this day.
Oh. Wait, a neurosurgeon? Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
they're still
it's
holding
like,
out hope, huh?
they're like one day they're like you can always go back.
You're like, I mean, yes, I could, but I don't think that's going to be a choice I'm going to make. But y'all, if y'all want to hold on to that, if that helps you sleep at night, by all means.
I don't want anybody in my hands in that way. And at this point, they are, they've been through too much.
Yes.
I've got gymnastics hands, and gymnastics hands, they will stay.
Noted.
So becoming like this, and again, this was, almost 2 decades ago when it wasn't the popular thing to just like go on AGT, right? It wasn't just like you go like work for Cirque, you go on AGT, you go and make your like career on Instagram as a circus performer, and all of a sudden all these people know you and you're just like everywhere. Like it was not like that 20 years ago when I started off like trying to like make a name. And, I was lucky because I had a name coming from sport. And that already, opened a lot of doors, but it doesn't open all of them. And there's many different people and things involved. There's many types of circus environments that you're going into. You can start out in LA. You can go into film and TV, which I started off in doing that too. You can try to go into stunts and do that as well. You can, you can try and use circus family credibility, which is dicey when you do not have that. You can go and do like the European circuit. You can go straight into like, the Asian circuit. You can, go into like the cruise ship circuit and maybe get stuck there. Like there's just so many different worlds. You can go into the modern circus, which was really springing up. You can go into ringling. You can, so you really have to figure out like where and kind of like what feels good for you. And that takes time, especially because you're young. And I think even if you're not young, it takes time. And, I say it's not for the faint of heart. It's, especially back then. I know that doesn't even maybe for some people seem like that long ago. And because I've been around now for a while, people, assume that I'm much younger than I am. So, they think that I maybe haven't been doing circus for very long, which is great because that shows that I've really taken care of myself and been
Mhm.
adaptable and been pivoting. But the level of pivoting that I had to do at that point in time
Right.
to like fend for myself and, start negotiating contracts, negotiating fees. I remember at the very beginning, there was someone that I was working with that was, had been in the game for a long time. They had like a circus event company, and we proposed a rate to them, a certain
Mhm.
fee that we wanted to get paid. And they were like, you will never get paid that amount of money to do circus.
What?
Like it will never, it will never happen. Like he was just so like, blasé about it. And he was like, it just it's just not possible. And the a million times over, how many times I have gotten that rate and how like far surpassing that, like, I got like within my career, but I
Mhm.
never forgot that. And I've never forgotten certain like just like solid things that people said to me at that time, which were just so, like they lacked vision. They had no vision.
Yes.
And who would have thought, right, that the environment would have become so mainstream. But
Mhm.
I mean, me and my partner at the time that I worked with, we definitely had the wherewithal. And
Yeah.
we were quite a bit younger than him, but we weren't that much younger than the person that said that. And so I think that just goes to show again, like what this environment can be like.
Mhm.
Circus can be very old school and very, very forward thinking at the exact same time. So, like combining those things, and then also too, people suggesting that you can only be a certain type of circus performer from your
Mhm.
background is also a thing.
Mhm.
So, it took a while because coming from the sport background, there was a lot of stigma around that up until
Mhm.
recently. People, like really like put a mark on you, and put like a whole like box around what you were going to be capable of, what kind of
Mhm.
style you were going to do, what you were going to look like, how you were going to express yourself, and also too like what you knew. They were like,
Right.
oh, well, you don't have a cousin in the game.
Uh-huh.
You don't have an auntie. You don't have an uncle. You don't have,
Mhm.
a sixth generation vouching for you. So there's only so much that you can know. And by way of you not knowing so much, this is how we're going to manipulate you. This is how we're going to stall you. This is how we're going to talk you out of your own good. This is how we're going to get way more out of you.
Mhm.
Then we should be able to, this is how we're going to put you in dangerous situations that you don't belong
Mhm.
in because we think that you don't know any better. So it was,
Mhm.
it was several things.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I understand that. And that's people putting you in a box, like literally putting you in a box and their own limiting beliefs. Like that person who told you, you're never going to make this much. It's like, why are you telling me that what? Please keep your limiting belief to yourself. Please keep it to yourself. Like, huh? What are you talking about? But it's that like people putting their boxes, their limitations, their limiting beliefs and projecting it on you. And at least through your, at that point when you were 18 and pivoted, and then throughout your career, you're like, but I don't understand why you have this limited belief, but I'm going to keep going. Like, I'm going to just keep advocating for myself and keep going in that direction. So, with that, I have a question about I know from that time you pivoted up until today, you are a different performer. And so, what is it that you found? Not that you found. Let me rephrase it. The performer you were when you were 18, and you were like, okay, I have so many options open to me. Which one should I choose? To now the performer you are now, like what has kind of been the arc of that journey? Because it's right, you had to find out who you were. And so you might have accepted things at 18 that you wouldn't accept now.
Definitely not.
Mhm, mhm.
The pandemic has not made that easy, though. I will say that
Oh,
to you all listening
yup.
in. I mean, like eviscerating our industry, and then,
Mhm,
us being in positions or people wanting to put us back in boxes because they're
mhm.
like, you just need opportunity now, right? Like you're
Right.
just going to take and need anything that you can
Mhm,
possibly get your hands on, which has been a whole struggle and a pivot in and of itself. But
mhm,
yeah, I really, what I understood even way back then, which I think is really great, is that I know myself better than others. And
uh-huh,
you have to be really, really, really strong in that. Like taking the advice of how others want to promote you. I remember at the beginning when I was in LA, and we signed up with a lot of dance companies, and they were taking on specialty acts like ours, like circus
Mm-hmm.
performers. And that's just how it was back then. It was before there were like circus industry friendly agencies that my friends
Mm-hmm.
eventually had to create in LA. So, we would go to like all the cattle calls, like for, like Christina Aguilera's tour, or for like
Uh-huh.
Eminem, or for like Beyonce. Like we would go to like the dance auditions, and then they would like say like, now this is your part to do like special skill. And so we would like humiliate ourselves trying to do like
Mm.
keeping up with like J-Lo's dancers, and
Yeah.
then have our like 5 minutes to shine and do our circus audition. And it was
Mhm.
so painful. And I mean, you wouldn't think that you would have agents that are like, we just don't know how to market you guys as circus performers. But like, that's the
Mhm.
feedback that we got way back then when we were trying to do like events, and we were trying to do specialty performances, or when they wanted to get us inside of a movie. And we
Mm.
would just say like, oh God, like if we were able to speak for ourselves, like how much better we would probably be able to do this. But it was
Yeah.
very, very challenging. So we would put like limits and boundaries on that. We would say, guess what?
Mm.
No more catacalls. If you want to see us, it's a one-on-one audition. We have to have a special moment, and we won't
Mhm.
be doing any of the dance because we're not dancers. We have dancing
Uh-huh.
capabilities, and we have
Right.
all of that background, but we
Right.
are not hip hop dancers, music video dancers who do this on the daily, who are going to go up against like the dancers from Usher's music video. Like that's
Right.
insane.
That's not my you're like, "That's not my ministry. That ain't it. That's not what I
That's not
do."
us. That's not what we do. So,
Oh.
we lost a lot of time, and we spent a lot of time exhaustively,
Mhm.
wasting time, losing out on jobs, being misrepresented. Also, too,
Mhm.
meeting a lot of cool people. I met a lot
Yeah.
of amazing, talented people through then, but it was a waste of time. And so, you have to know when to cycle out of something, or when people
Mhm.
just don't understand, or they don't get you. So
Mhm.
that changed a lot of what we did. And then
Mhm.
eventually there were like circus agents, like I said, that came in, and then they started creating like circus specific auditions that, when
Mhm.
I was doing them at the beginning, there were like 5 of us to choose from. I had to pivot
Okay.
very heavily when now it's about 50 to 100 circus performers coming or submitting to an audition versus there being 5 of us to choose from.
Wow.
So that's how much it changed just over these
Okay.
last, like, few decades that I've been, been doing it then. And
Yeah.
the arc of the things that you will do, that you're willing to do, or
Mhm.
the type of auditions that people are going to ask you to do, which
Mhm.
I will not do. I will
Mhm.
do them in a certain kind of way. You give a certain kind of time. Like even if someone is asking me to come in person, for example, but
Mhm.
I'm mostly booked off tape. I'm mostly booked off of my reel.
Yeah.
Those are things that you question. Those are things that, you say, you have to be willing to lose out, or
Mhm.
to take that risk, or
Mhm.
to hold your own. But,
Mhm.
cycling through those different performances, those different contracts, am I willing to do, a million performances per day outside over the water at this point in my career? No, I'm not. Was I willing to do that, a few decades ago? Yes, I was.
Uh-huh.
Like, am I willing to take that certain amount of money? Am I willing to wear that type of costume, especially if you guys don't have my skin tone matched, which is number one, especially if you don't
Mm.
have something that fits me, which is number two. Am I willing to go out and humiliate myself on stage for spaces and for things that, can accommodate me? Am I willing to go out
Mhm.
with my hair looking a certain way now? No, I'm not.
Mhm.
I'm going to ask, that I get to do for me, because or if there's a professional there, which we're still waiting for that.
Yeah.
we're, we're still waiting on. So,
Mhm.
am I willing to, do contracts in certain countries or in certain cities? It
Mhm.
comes down to things of that nature. And again, projecting myself in a medium where someone says, I don't want that from you. I want you to perform in this way, in this type of emotional way, in this type of character, and
Mhm.
saying no to those things, and saying no to those requests. And I will say this as well: when I started getting feedback at that time in my life, when it was my idea that I went through with fully, I got the
Uh-huh.
best response. When it was something that I compromised on for
Uh-huh.
people that wanted to hire me that I was really not liking, immediately people would say, we didn't really like that without me even saying anything or telling them. And
Mm.
that was such a big lesson for me at that time, and getting that kind of validation and mirroring back when I was young. And it's really carried me through these years as well. Whenever I feel it intuitively, if like that just does not feel right, or that's not how I made it, or that's not how I designed it, or
Mm-hmm.
that's not how I intended it to show up, or like, yes, it seems like a small change, but that small change can derail and unravel everything you're putting out there. And when everything that you're doing is what you need to do to get the next job, the importance of owning every aspect of what should go right. I mean, it's the longevity of your career. It's make or breaking the next several years for you that you cannot get back. It's the difference between having 6 months off to rolling right into the next space because people really liked what you did just
Mm-hmm.
recently, and it's very timely and it's very of the moment. It doesn't matter if you can show them something that you think that they'll like better, even sometimes that was maybe from like a year or two ago. They want to
Mm-hmm.
see what you did right now, and that makes them feel a certain way about you.
Right.
And it makes you feel a certain way when you're selling something that you don't believe in either. And I think
Yes.
that that is something very important to remember. And you're not always in different spaces that you're going to have full agency or control over that. But that's also a reason why I took a lot more independent contracts than I did more standard contracts where many of those things were not in my hands. So they would
Mm-hmm.
not be in my hands. So, it is a thing of thinking, okay, I now have to hustle to make sure that I have another year. I'm also up against someone that I know that just signed 2 years, and they know exactly where they're going to be for the next 2 years. I, and in maybe some ways a little bit too extreme, was willing to forego that that certainty of a
Mm-hmm.
contract
Mm-hmm.
for the sake of my individuality, my independent creativity, my independent thinking, my independent business know-how, because your hands can get very tied if you give over too much.
Mm-hmm.
But you also
Mm-hmm.
have a lot of responsibility if you're taking on everything.
Fair. That's fair. But here's the thing, though. Saying no means saying yes to something else. Saying no to what you don't want means saying yes to something else and saying yes to yourself. But, you've had to learn that. Even with me as an actress, it's like, I don't regret any of the contracts that I took these past, 15 years. But now I'm a different person, and I'm not going to accept I want to say foolishness, but some of the foolishness that I'm not going to accept that now. And so it's like the
Mm-mm,
same for you. You're like, no, I don't want to do that. I'm not willing to do that. And it's standing strong in your no and advocating for yourself, but also unlearning something that we learned of well, it's an opportunity, so I have to. No, you actually don't. Because if not an opportunity you want, then that's not
mm-hmm,
for you. That's
mm-mm.
not for you. So it's unlearning that in any performance space of oh, but it's a job, it's an opportunity, it's the okay, but if it don't if it don't sit right in your soul, if you're I don't know about this, then that's not for you. But we're not taught
Exactly.
that.
No, we're never taught that. And I teach that a lot in my Think Like an Acrobat series.
Mhm, mhm, yeah.
I get so fed up and have been so fed up for so many years because
Yeah.
I get those same, statements and that same feedback. And that same level of frustration. And I
Mhm,
hear those same conversations happening within the circus industry and in
mhm,
performing arts space as well. And especially if you're in a niche environment, man. I mean, the
mhm,
stress and the strain that they put on us for oh, but you love it so much. So that means that you should just have no rights. Like, where did that come through? I'm like, so a lawyer loves being a lawyer, but I don't see them giving up any rights to anything. But
right.
because it's my passion, I'm just supposed to be grateful and take the least of everything. I really don't know how that makes sense to any sane person, but I hear it from people from all ages, from
Mhm,
all facets in the circus, especially people
mhm,
that want to shame you and make you feel like you shouldn't, be able to speak on anything, because then all of
mhm,
a sudden it becomes like this first world problem or something like that. And I'm like, wait a second. People in all different types of professions that are outside of the arts have a say so in what
mhm,
they do, how they do it. And It has nothing to do with the love of what you're doing. I think because you love it so much, you have every right to say no. Like love says no a lot. You don't say yes
Yeah.
to everything to like a child. Just like out of love, you say no. You put up
Right.
boundaries. And so why are we supposed to be boundaryless? Within like the business
That
aspect of who we do. I mean, like why? I mean, I talk to people that feel like they don't even deserve to make money from doing circus, from creating things on
what?
their own. I mean, it's literally to me insane. And
Mhm.
I will not waver nor falter in that. I said, you know what? That all sounds good and well until you want to buy a house, right? Or until something really egregious happens to you, heaven forbid, within a very highly dangerous environment. And
Mhm.
something very not great happens to you, and people aren't there for you.
Mhm.
And where's the love then? Because
Right.
I have seen love evaporate in all of these very loved up environments very, very quickly when things go wrong.
Quick, fast, and in a hurry. It's gone.
For myself and for others,
Right.
very, very fast, there is no more love left. When
Mhm.
you have to get lawyers involved, when you have to have good insurance, when you
Mhm.
have to have um, assets to fall back on.
Mhm.
And even when you need just like a creative idea because something people aren't latching on to something that you're doing or they're not responding well to you, you are now on your own. You were
Yeah.
always on your own. And
Yeah.
I think that that's a really good reminder as well. You have a community, you have an industry, you have an environment, but it's still you.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's still
Understood.
you. No one's going to do it for you. Um, so you better had educated yourself on your own. And
Mhm.
this is the other part of pivoting and being in spaces that are taken care of for you and
Mhm.
pivoting in spaces where you have to take care of those things for yourself. Because I've been around, many artists and circus performers and circus entrepreneurs, circuspreneurs that, when they get out of those environments, they don't know how to take care of themselves. They don't know how to
Mhm.
have those conversations because they have never, ever had them. And being green in those spaces and the overwhelmment that comes with that, it almost makes them, again, want to pivot into a completely different career.
Mhm.
And that to me is very sad. And that to me is such a shame, especially if you've built up such artistic intelligence, artistic, capabilities. And now you don't even feel like you understand how to utilize them to function outside of a space that was, taken care of for you. So I always tell people, I'm always looking for a job. I'm always looking for a pivot. I have been that
Mhm.
way since the beginning and I will always be that way. I'm always looking for a
Right.
job. I don't matter. It doesn't matter what kind of job I have. I'm
Mhm.
always, always, always looking for an opportunity. And that's really carried me through a lot over the years, I have to
Yeah.
say. Yeah.
Understood. Understood. And I think I'm safe to assume that that also carried you through the pandemic as well, because I know from what the information you've given me that it's like right, the pandemic was a lot, but also you have 2 podcasts that came out of it as well.
Yeah. And so
So
and
let
so that was the
that was
amazingness.
pivot. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the pivot. That was the pivot. And that was the
Uh-huh.
pivot that I was supposed to have done years prior that I
Mm.
just did not do. I did
There it
not do.
is. There it
I just
is.
pulled those things out of a vault. They were already created. They already
Mhm.
existed. I had already
Mhm.
shot several of those ideas too. And
What?
they were just there. And I didn't even realize how easy it was to do them. I got
Mhm.
very heady. I overthought things. I even went into different platforms that like made like no sense to
Uh-huh.
do the things in. I overcomplicated everything. And
Mhm.
because there was nothing else that I could actually do because like I couldn't go anywhere, like everything got canceled overnight like everybody else. It was
Uh-huh.
like, oh, what's the simplest version of doing this and not caring? Oh, this.
Right.
Like just this speaking into a microphone, like
Mhm.
having all of like the fascinating people that I've met over the years and having these conversations. And then now not being nervous nor scared at all to speak on issues that I think are very conducive and important within the circus environment and within the competitive space, that
Mhm.
I've always wanted to talk about that are taboo or things that people, are too afraid to have a conversation about on
Mhm.
camera. So like this this version of myself that people have been telling me to do for years. They've been telling me
Mm.
to speak, to have a podcast, to, be a commentator, like
Uh-huh.
all of those things, to be, like a personality. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh, I don't really know. Like, I think you guys think that I'm like a certain way, but I don't really think that other people will think that, I just
Uh-huh.
had this whole thing. And, I was like, we're silent performers and that's what we do. And,
Mhm.
like if I open my mouth too much, people are just going to want me to be quiet. I just had
Mhm.
all of these different thoughts and ideas about
Mhm.
where I should be and how I should be doing it and what I shouldn't be doing. And as soon as this pandemic rolled through, I mean, again, by the grace of the universe, it really just like stripped all of that away.
Mhm.
And it gave me the future of what I'm doing now and then what I would like to do. And it's really spiraled into so many different avenues. And of course, also things that I just, again, really wanted to do that I did not like that I was not being invited to do. And that turned
Mm.
into a different conversation, especially being a circuspreneur, especially being a woman, especially
Mhm.
being a woman of color in the circus space. And having this knowledge, like most of the podcasters, within the circus spaces are mostly white males, and they've
Mhm.
always been. And everyone always says that too, like, but why? Like, we've all been in this business for so many years. Why aren't we speaking on an environment that we know so well? Like, why are there
Uh-huh.
gatekeepers that we keep on, like, just allowing to do that, but we can do something about it?
Right.
And I was very happy to be in this space finally. I mean, it was stressful. I would like to say that wasn't the best of times also too to get into so many things because it was very stressful. I was trying to keep my life going. I
Yeah.
was trying to keep my career going. But again, it was keeping my career going in a different way. And
Mhm.
because I was open and because I was malleable, and because I was willing, and it really, really saved this next incarnation and this next pivot of what I am doing and how I'm doing it. And actually redefining a space that I want to stay in because there's been many, many times where I've not wanted to stay in the circus industry.
Mhm.
I've not wanted to stay in the circus space. The competitive space, I've been doing a lot of advocacy in and around that too for many, many years. So I'm like
Yeah.
dealing with that. But
Yeah.
I needed to deal with what I felt needed to be introduced into the circus space. And it's one of those things where you're like, well, if it's not me, then who?
That that part. That part. If it's not me, then who? But also, like, you were kinda like, "Well, this little imposter syndrome that I have, you can move out of the way." Because if people were telling you for years to be a commentator, be a personality, have a podcast, speak about what you know because it's your lived experience, and then the pandemic was like, "Oh, yeah? Now I'm gonna make you do it." I'm gonna make you I feel that same even with me, I feel like, first of all, we're blessed to have survived the pandemic. I'm like, "Thank you, Lord." That's the first thing. Thank you for
Oh my God.
surviving. And then
Yes.
second, it's like, pandemic was like, "What you finna do now?" Like, "You gotta you gotta do something. Are you gonna do it or not? Like, are you gonna do it?" That's really what it was.
I was like, I have nothing to lose. I have
Mhm.
nothing to lose. I've already lost it all. And remember, Ayana, I also too survived. Well, I survived not, physically and emotionally, but in some ways too. 2008 and
Mhm.
2009 were
Mm.
horrible for
Okay.
the entertainment industry. And they were horrible for the circus industry. It was obviously not, oh God, what we're going through still now with the pandemic, but
Mhm.
people lost everything.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the circus world really slowed down. I mean,
Mhm.
and there are those that are in the industry now that did not live through that, but there were so many
Mhm.
people that were tired out of the circus
Mhm.
industry that shouldn't have, that had so
Yeah.
many more years in them.
Yeah.
And so as soon as all this happened, I was like, that's not going to be me.
Mhm.
That is not going to be me because everyone started retiring. I mean, I have
Mm.
people that, a lot of colleagues that babied out, which is wonderful. But more people just cycled out because they were like, I can no longer do this. And
Mhm.
there was zero support also too, like, like within government
Mhm.
for all of us artists as well. And so that was a big thing for me that I've been talking and speaking on for a really long time too. But then
Mhm.
again, because of the pandemic, got a part of, a nonprofit. We organized and, we mobilized, we did all
Mhm.
those things that no one did in '08 and '09.
Yeah.
The strategy was different. no one came to each other's aid. I had companies reaching out to me at that time, very well to do companies, even Cirque du Soleil saying, we're going to go silent for a while. And, even Cirque du Soleil that went bankrupt during the pandemic,
Mhm.
those that don't remember, Cirque du Soleil went bankrupt and went under in '08 and in '09 too. They
Mm.
laid off like 90% of their workforce at that time too. And they were a big moneymaker for me as an independent contractor and
Yeah.
as an independent circus performer. And they said, we'll probably go quiet for like 6 or 7 months and then we'll be back. And they literally
Mm.
did that, but it destroyed so many artists
Right.
that could not come back from that. So they did that again this next year around, and I was
Right.
like, wow, the deja vu. It was like
Ah,
10 years later, I'm
woo.
10 years better. I would say, though, I did not build myself up as much online as I could have within
Mhm.
that amount of time, which I should have because I had friends that had online stores and had
Mm.
online businesses. And when the pandemic hit, that was their everything. Some people already had like circus apps for teaching, which is
Okay.
something that I didn't necessarily have. So there were even things even around then, and some of those people had started those during '08 and '09, and they had sustained them for this
Mm.
last decade.
Yeah.
And so when the pandemic hit again, they were even more prepared because of
Mhm.
what they had created. So I love talking about my mistakes. I always tell people it's the
Yeah.
things that you made mistakes that you still see for yourself that you're like, okay, I was better, but I could have been even better with,
Mhm.
my pivot could have not have been such a hard right.
Mhm.
Um, with
Right.
trying
Right.
to do virtual performances and teaching excessively online hours and
Mhm.
hours at a time, um, and then obviously falling back on whatever else I had financially, and then also
Mhm.
just spending time of creating those things, putting together business plans, and so I mean those are valuable uses of my time,
Yeah.
which I used, and I'm really, really grateful for. I mean,
Mhm.
now going 3 years into where we are now,
Mhm.
I was able to pull from a past experience
Yes.
in a way that I am very grateful for. It was still very imperfect. I'm not saying that that solved all of my problems or all of my issues. And, even again, the thoughts of like, do I want to stay in this industry?
Mhm.
Because again, maybe that's your pivot. Maybe that's your pivot out completely into,
Mhm.
but you're taking those skills with you, which I also love to teach as well. How are you going to apply your circuspreneurship into that other environment, because
Yeah.
you've built up so much of being this renegade in an environment that is still so unregulated and so kind of like niche and unusual. How
Mhm.
are you going to take that and use that, because you're not starting from zero,
Mhm.
which I kind of, like my heart drops sometimes when I hear any kind of artist or entrepreneur in any kind of like artistic field feeling like they are. I'm like, you've
Yeah.
made it this far with this kind of work, with this kind of, people being a certain way to you. We've had all sorts of things said to us. The amount of situations I've had to like get myself out of. I've had to get
Mhm.
myself out of countries
Ooh, girl.
where it wasn't going well. The
Uh-huh.
contract was not being honored. Something
Mhm.
was very off or very sketchy, or we were not being treated well. And it's like, I not just have to get myself out of this. I have to get myself out of this with a job.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Like,
Understood, yeah. But you've survived all of that, and it's like, in the end, it's yes, we all make mistakes, and you're like, "Ooh, I coulda done that better," but also, like, you live and you learn. Like, literally
hmm
that you live and you learn, and you go, "Okay, you know what? Great. I learned that from last time, and maybe I coulda done this better, but going forward, maybe I can figure out, okay, let me do this little situation better or do this better." Like, it's all a learning experience and also trying to enjoy the journey. I think that I could say that's where I'm at, like, now to be like, "No, you gotta enjoy the journey." Even when you make a mistake and
yeah.
go, "Oh, that wasn't okay, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. Keep going." And keep going, it'll all be fine, it'll all be fine. Uh,
And that's where the mental health comes in,
Mhm,
and that's where you go for me too. And I'm glad that I learned that throughout my, advocacy as a survivor of USA Gymnastics.
mhm,
And putting that within this environment too, within circus, of being like, okay, you're not just supposed to be suffering all the time. You're not supposed to be anxious all the time. Like,
Right.
no matter like what the situation is, and I don't care how amazing that experience is, are you happy? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what's your baseline? Is your baseline joy? Because I've gotten that feedback a lot too over the years. It's like, oh, but you still smile, you still laugh, like you're still, because I meet some jaded folks out there. And,
Mm.
and I've also too learned through their experiences of seeing people very, 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 very unhappy with where they're
Mm-hmm.
at. And I don't care what situation or what opportunity you're getting. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it has to be an experience that feeds your soul
Mm-hmm.
in a pleasant way. As
Mm-hmm.
much as possible. And what are you doing to take care of yourself? Because it's
Mm-hmm.
been a process of elimination for myself, figuring out what makes me tick, what makes me feel good, what am I unwilling to do, what are those habits I'm willing to give up that are actually
Mm-hmm.
going to make me excited, and what are those things
Mm-hmm.
that are really just out of your hands that you learn at a certain amount of time too. Like, those
Yeah.
are things that I just like really cannot control. But I just, for myself personally, I don't know how people are making it if they don't have some type of practice or self-care practice or spiritual
Mm-hmm.
practice or some type of something that centers them or that they can fall back on, that they can believe in. Because,
Mm-hmm.
being in these environments that are so highly challenging and unique and destabilizing, I use a lot of different tools to get through. I am a meditator, I use yoga, I do
Mm-hmm.
lectures, I have mentors, like I do everything imaginable, and I've gone to every single workshop you can imagine. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
have literally, I've created a village and community for myself as well that is really profound, and also too outside of the space that I inhabit
Yeah.
as a circuspreneur, which I have found has kept me much happier and
Mm-hmm.
healthier when I'm relating to folks and to friends and to family that are not all consumed in a space that I'm all consumed by. Because
Mm-hmm.
I think that is very unhealthy. If
Yeah.
you live and breathe an environment and in a space where there is nothing about you that's outside of that, and you overly identify with who you are through what you do, I find that very, very, very damaging.
Say that again for the people in the back. Say, because I listen, okay? Say it again, because no, it's rough. And I would speak personally. I used to do that. I did. Luckily in my 20s, I kind of let it go. But then the pandemic was really like, but no, who are you? Your industry is gone. Sorry, yes, you're an actress, but you're not right now. So like, who are you? And it's right. Like, I just took so many nuggets from that. Like, is your baseline joy? Like, I love that. That might be the title of this episode, because that got me. Right. Like, is your baseline joy? Because it has like, and then doing things and talking to people, communicating, conversing with people outside of what you do. It's so important. Just be a human.
Yes, yes,
Just
just
be
be a
a
human, and
human.
don't be a circus human. I hear that a lot. Like I live in Vegas and I live in LA, and people even say like, "Oh, but you're a circus human," and I'm like, "No, I'm not.
No.
No, I'm not. I'm a human being first.
Mm-hmm.
Circus is a hat that I put on and that I try on and that I love to put
Mm-hmm.
on. But I put on many different hats,
Yes.
many different things as a human being.
Yes.
And that's a way that I express myself. It's a facet, and that's
Yes.
cool. Just like I'm not just like only a spiritual person, it's like all of those like
Mm-hmm.
in and out of who you are daily, you are just who you are.
Yeah.
And, so I think having the freedom and giving yourself the space and freedom to not put yourself
Mm-hmm.
in a box again, and, just like rewriting your own story. Because again, if you do that, your pivots are going to seem very small. They're not
Mm-hmm.
going to seem like you have room to grow or room to evolve. And that can hurt you mentally of thinking, but this is who I am. And within this is all that I think that I can do.
Uh-huh.
Like, where are you going to go with that? Because life may not even be making that a way for you, because life has stopped me multiple times. I mean, multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
I just had something kind of like, scary even the other day where I got a little, injured when I was working.
Yeah.
And instantly, and it brought me back. I got very present And I was like, that's as fast as it happens. And then all of a sudden your life would be different. I had a situation like 2 years ago, health wise, where like literally overnight, it was like my entire life could be different right now. Like I now don't even know like my trajectory. I don't know if I'm supposed to be doing any of those things because my life is all of a sudden giving me a completely different set of cards. And I am grateful that I'm like malleable enough for that. But I work on that. And I think, again, we're all like a work in progress. You have to work on staying flexible. You have to work on staying pivotable. You have to work on staying outside of the spheres of what anyone wants to tell you that you should be or how you need to speak about yourself, think about yourself, like feel about yourself. Any of those things. I just think it's very healthy to constantly and consistently question any labels or limitations or anything anybody's putting on you or that you're putting on yourself that you don't understand, maybe even if it's like subconsciously. But that's where it takes the work. I mean, like I go to therapy, being explorative. As artists, we can take it all sorts of places, but doing that and staying grounded too, I think is very important. You don't want to be, I think, so beyond, I guess people maybe call it like airy or out there, that you lose the ability to be sober, that you lose the ability to be present and to be grounded. And I definitely, because I've been on like kind of a wild ride and the space can be pretty chaotic, bringing myself back and staying centered, and figuring out how that's going to be when I'm the different person that I am. Because with you changing and evolving, what you do and what you need to take care of yourself and what you need to do to tend to yourself also needs to change too. So nothing is static for me. Everything is very transformative and I think interchangeable. And I think that again is very healthy. It doesn't mean that everything is perfect. Doesn't mean it's supposed to be perfect. It's not perfect. And, reflecting back over these years and, all of these journeys that I've been fortunate to be into and to survive, because I think we're all, wherever you are in your life, you could not be there. You maybe would not be there in your life, wherever you're at right now. And I think, again, it's the possibility and the potential to try again. And, those failures that we all have and that we keep on having. I love the idea of getting back up. And if I learned anything from my competitive years, it's literally just always about getting back up and trying again, because you can be imperfect like a million times a day. And throughout that, you have to pick yourself back up. You don't know what it's going to look like. You might be crying, you might be angry, you might be happy, you might be peaceful, you might be compassionate, you might be depressed, but getting back up and trying again and giving yourself the next opportunity, like really give yourself second chances, because other people won't, but you can give those second chances to yourself.
Ooh, I love you. See, you already did it. You just answered my next question. I was about to be like, what? Look, because you've been dropping nuggets this whole time, so thank you. But I was gonna be like, what's your little nugget of wisdom? You just said it. Give yourself a second chance because other people won't. That's it.
Thank you, Ayana, for this for this time and space.
You are so very welcome. You are so very welcome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing and opening up. Thank you for sharing this space with me. Thank you. So before I let you go, though, tell people where they can find you out here on these internet streets.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast, Diana. I'm just, again, really grateful and honored. And listeners, thank you. You can find me at Shenea Stiletto. That is SheneaStiletto. On literally all platforms. You can also find me at Live Like An Acrobat, Live Like An Acrobat podcast, which is available on all platforms. You can find me on circustalk.com if you are adventurous or if you're in the performing arts space. You can subscribe and become a member so you can hear my Think Like an Acrobat series. But I also too release little snippets of that for the public as well, to learn like little gems. But I highly recommend that you subscribe to a space, because I try and give as as many open workshops as I can on every single topic that you can imagine of what it takes to be a circuspreneur, what it takes to just be an entrepreneur, an artist, a performing artist, from business to artistic to mental health. So exploring all of those things, please find me at either Shenea Stiletto, Live Like an Acrobat, or Think Like an Acrobat.
Yay. Thank you for sharing. Don't worry. All of that will go in the show notes, y'all. Do not worry. I'll make it easy. You could just click and connect. And before I let you go, Shenea, I must say to you that I acknowledge you, I celebrate you, and I uplift you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're so welcome.
I'm so honored. I just adore you. I love your work. I love your podcast. You have amazing guests. You're amazing. You're inspiring me. You're motivating me to continue to podcast. Because my oh my, like, it's a journey podcasting and being a podcaster, and you are amazing. And I love the network that you've built up and the community that you have. And thank you for being you and for like starting again, because each time you don't have to.
Yes.
You don't have to, but you're doing it.
Yes.
And it's, I'm really appreciative of you for, maintaining your spirit and maintaining your liveliness and, your motivation. And so thank you for inspiring us to be better, to do better, to think better, and to feel better. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. I hope you have been informed and inspired by this week's episode. Make sure to hit the subscribe button to be notified when new episodes are out. To stay up to date and in the know about merchandise, exclusive content, and how to support the show, please subscribe to the newsletter at ayanabay.com/podcast. That's AYANABEY.com/podcast. And there's a link in the show notes. This show's executive producer is Ayana Major Bay, and editor is Kieran Niemand. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll speak to you soon.
Just little bits wrapped up in rice that you can share with friends.